Ladies and gentlemen, this is Deliver It, your Agile Product Owners podcast. My name is Corey Bryan. Kim Andrikaitis, not here. She's off being newly employed, so she's got some things to wrap up there, which is fine because today we have a guest. Our guest is a speaker, blogger, book author, including one of my favorites, the Scrum Product Ownership book, a fellow podcaster, and a general man about the Agile globe.
Oh, no. What an introduction.
Bob Galen, how are you?
I'm good, Corey. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this. You know, we've had scheduling issues or challenges.
You're a busy man.
I'm a busy man. So I've been looking forward to this the minute I saw that you have had dare I say competing podcast?
Companion.
A companion.
There you go.
That's a much better word.
Yeah.
A companion podcast to to our Metacast.
That's right.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So we were going to get to talking to Bob about some classes he's done and some articles he's written. I did want to go over a few interesting things at the top of the show. The first thing is that we have a new podcast hosting site. It's at the same address. If you're on iTunes or Stitcher, you still should be able to get this show the same way. If you listen any other different way, hopefully, it will be easy to update your information, but check it out. If you're listening to this show fine, then you'll be fine for all of our future content. All that's good. I did see a very interesting article. There was a guy who wrote an article. He had been a product owner for 4 months. And he learned some things that he wanted to share. So he shared 3 of his lessons from being a product owner at a company. The first thing that he said, the lesson he learned, was that you own nothing as a product owner. Interesting concept. The reason is because he says you have stakeholders. Those stakeholders have desires. You have to implement those desires. So whatever they're looking for is what you have to find a way to deliver. I kind of agree with that. It is something where, unless you're owning your own company or you're running your own product, then you do have people to answer for. I agree with that part. And you have to take their involvement into account. You have to make sure you satisfy your stakeholders. But I do think there's some ownership, some decisions that you can make as a product owner. Once you're in that role and once you're proven that you're doing things right. Lesson 2 was, the biggest priority that you have, your top priority, is to have a clear purpose and state your challenges. So make sure everybody understands which direction you're headed in. Make sure everybody understands, why you're doing something, and to get everybody on the same page. And I definitely agree with that. That's a great lesson to learn. And number 3 is no matter what it is, it's always a people problem. So if you're dealing with a technology issue or a release issue or some other type of miscommunication, it's all people problems, and you all have to work on solving those people problems. But one of the interesting things he said, and I kind of agree with this, is that being a product owner does not mean you're the product specialist. But it does mean that you're able to get everybody together and figure out how to deliver something that satisfies your customers and your users. And I like that article. We'll put a link to that in the show so that you can read it yourself. What do you think, Bob?
It was interesting. I mean, I sort of align with maybe where you were going. You're so soft and nice sometimes. It's like the top priority, yes. The second point, the people problem. I mean, everything's a people, in my house.
Absolutely.
At home, it's a people problem, right? Everywhere. Or a dog problem. So it's either animals or it's people. But the own nothing, it didn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the point that stakeholders are the driving entity, but if I'm even interviewing a product owner, I want someone who has passion and ownership and vision that comes from inside themselves too. Yeah. I mean, it has to align with stakeholders.
Absolutely.
But I want it to bubble from inside of them.
Yeah.
I don't want them to just be an echo or a recording.
You're not a project manager.
Exactly.
You're not just letting something go.
Exactly.
Sometimes I do get to the other side of that where I get too defensive about products and get to the point where no, it's my product. You can't have it. You'll pry it from my cold dead hands.
But I'd rather have that. I mean, you can take it to an extreme if you bring weapons into play, right? Or something.
Yeah.
But I would rather have that sort of that passionate ownership that it's mine and I'm hurting it. And I have all facets. So I own the feature care and feeding of it. I own the defect care and feeding of it. I own the refactoring care. So I own the holistic care and feeding of this thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not saying it's bad. I understand exactly what he was saying.
I understand too. And I agree with the other two more than I do that first one.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I wanted to bring you here, Bob, to talk about, specifically a class that you gave in Massachusetts in September. And the title of the class was Product Ownership 2.0.
So I'm going to disappoint you, Corey.
Okay.
So
go ahead. I'm prepared.
So you know what I put this class together and I have a title. So titles sell classes.
Right.
I hate to tell you, you know that.
I know that.
Right. Titles sell everything.
Yeah.
So, and I put together this class that I wanted to talk about sort of next generation challenges of product ownership. I mean, Scrum's been around since 93. So Scrum first surfaced in 93. Product owner was an initial role. So we've had 20 years of playing around with that role. Now, I think it was ill-defined. So when I first wrote the first edition of the product owner book, there wasn't around 2007, 7, there wasn't much on the product owner role. So from that point back, there wasn't a whole lot other than product owners own products. They prioritize the backlog, blah, blah, blah. That's all they do.
Yeah.
So I wanted to fill that gap. So I was hopeful that, there would be these next generation challenges like scaling is something. So I put this description together. What I found is during the same class in Boston, I had a Scrum Mastery class. And what's interesting is that class filled and was over capacity and no one signed up for the Product Owner 2.0 class.
Oh no.
Now I was giving it at Forrester. If you ever heard Forrester Research.
Right.
I was giving it at Forrester as an internal class. So it still ran. It just ran as a Forrester only class. And they took the liberty of overloading it with people themselves. So there was about 20 people in it. Originally they had a class capacity of 10. What I found though, and I think I'm finding this in general, I don't think there is anything like, Product Ownership 2.0.
Okay.
I think it's 1.0 practices that we still need to work on them. I'll give you a for instance, like release planning.
Yeah.
I still think almost every organization I run into does either they don't do release planning or they do a terrible job of it, periodic. They don't invest in it at all. And so I think release planning, looking at a release with the team. So PSI, if you're familiar with SAFe,
right.
It's PSI or PI planning that get a team together to actually plan work before you commit to it, which is a backlog to me, a grooming or a refinement activity. You would think that people were really good at that. But I hardly run into anyone who's doing it. And if they are doing it, they're giving it lip service or they're complaining about the time and then they cancel it. So if they do schedule it, they cancel it a lot.
Which is odd because I would imagine that most of the people who are coming to the class and just starting out on this, they're not going to release every 2 weeks. They're not going to release every time they do a sprint. They're going to batch these things up into quarterlies or monthlies.
This is like quarterly release planning.
So there's got to be some larger planning than just the sprints.
There's not a lot of that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think it's just, I still think from a product ownership perspective, we're still in 1.0 land or 1.0++.
Okay.
Which says we're still not doing the basic practices. Another thing is story writing. You would think after all this time that we would be like Edgar Allan Poe's from a story writing perspective out in the Agile community.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Right? And it would flow. Like stories would actually pop out of thin air. We don't have to write them. They just sort of they emerge from our brains. Because everyone says they're writing. So everyone says they're writing user stories.
Right.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And when you look at the stories,
they're either too short or they're too long.
They're and it's actually what I'm finding lately in the last couple of years is they're too long. Grooming, for example. I mean, it's like you might as well put chain a dog on a table and just beat it. Like every story is beaten to death.
Yeah.
I'm starting to coin this term of death by 1,000 questions. So in a refinement, every story is death by 1,000 questions, usually from the developers.
Yeah.
And I would have thought that would have gone away, and then we're into more elegant 2.0 refinement of stories, but that's not the case.
So the reason you're kind of backing off that 2.0 is because the 1.0 stuff isn't.
I need a new
title
yet. Which talks about, it's not that the title was bad, but I think it scared people away, one. And I think it's inappropriate. I personally am starting to think that there is no product ownership 2.0.
Okay.
It's the current thing we need to start talking about as coaches is product ownership done well.
Yeah.
And I think we're still struggling with product ownership done well. Yeah. Now, not at certain places, like, here, under your guidance, it's product ownership done incredibly well. And
of course.
Kim's incredibly, but out in the world, I think folks are still struggling with it. And I'm talking about folks who attend the CSPO classes. So, so even the certified folks are really struggling with it in the real world. Finding the time.
So you talked about release planning. You talked about scaling, the product owner role or product owners on teams.
So one of the interesting things, it's not so much scaling. So I thought we could talk about SAFE, and I thought we could talk about the 3-tiered model of getting sort of having workflow from concept down to cash, right? So portfolio planning, project planning, to me, the land of release planning, and then team execution.
Right.
And one of the things I do see this is that portfolio level from a product owner point of view is weak. Like, how do you evaluate business cases and things like that? Yeah. But if your execution model is broken, your team model, well, then I don't know if the portfolio is the right sort of the right place to focus. So release planning is one of those things. Story writing is one of those things. I think just basically thinking about value propositions, how to prioritize. So prioritization is still a challenge for folks. I don't know if you see that.
Absolutely.
Across stakeholders. Yeah.
When you've got 7 different stakeholders that all want the same thing from the same team, or not the same thing, but they want different things from the same team, somebody has to say, this is a bigger priority than that. And I'm sorry, you don't want to hear that.
And how do you negotiate that? Right. And it's to me, that's a 1.0 activity. It's also, I think, maybe the seniority or the experience level of the product owner in knowing how to negotiate that. Right. Or almost not negotiate. In Boston, we were talking about, I was saying get out of that game. So try to get yourself out of the negotiation. Like, don't make it your problem. Make it an organizational problem.
Do you think it's more valuation, or do you think it's making an actual decision on something like that?
I think it's making an actual decision. Right? I think folks don't want to make decisions.
They really don't. No.
I saw, I get a lot of email, and I forget, Steve Johnson passed in his newsletter. He's a product manager guy, and he had an article that he passed around, talking from someone else. He was recommending an article where they said, everyone's running their organizations. I'm not doing the title right, but stop running your organizations over capacity. Stop running your backlogs over the capacity of your organization. I think there's there's a disease out there that almost every company has, that the ask vastly exceeds the capacity of their organization, which lands in the lap of product owners, right?
Yeah. It's up to product owners to make that hard call to say, look, I know you want all these things and we really we can do all of them, but we can't do them all at the same time. Right. So which one do we want to do first? Do we want to do the thing that's bring us more revenue? Do we want to do the thing we can finish first and get it out there and see if it works? And, I'm fine with either. But you, as my stakeholders, as my business, need to tell me what's more valuable, and let's make that decision. And I've been in the position several times where they refuse to make a decision, so I'm going to make the decision. Right. And if I'm wrong, fine. I'll be wrong, but at least I've made a decision and the team can continue. And that's what you have to do sometimes. You have to be, or you just do something else, right? If they won't make a decision, you say, fine, we're not going to work on that at all. We're going to work on something else.
There was a client I was working with once, and they had distributed, it was a large scale, enterprise level client that had distributed offices around the world. And so the team had like 15 stakeholders. So there was a small set of scrum teams with 15 distributed stakeholders around the world who had different asks. There were 2 product owners for a set of scrum teams. So from a scrum point of view, I think it was set up not badly, right?
Yeah.
It was the product owners were astute from a business. They had been with the company for a long time.
Good.
They understood the domain very well. But unfortunately, they had 15 people that had totally different views spread around the world. So some of them didn't even know each other, but they were the stakeholders for this product, for this product evolution. They were evolving a legacy product. And, at one point, the product owners put themselves, so they were the arbiter. They were in the middle. It was their bad. They had to please everyone.
Yeah.
And I remember they started doing things like value poker and value poker with monopoly money and things like that. But it wasn't just the technique of getting collaborative voting on prioritization, but it was putting themselves. They started with, the negotiation was don't negotiate. The negotiation was get yourself out of the middle of these 15 people and get them to negotiate with each other.
Yeah.
So rather than having 15 people negotiate with the product owner, have the product owner displace themselves. And I think immature product owners stay in the middle and they try to please everyone.
They can help facilitate.
And but get yourself out of the middle of that and get those folks directly. They're the leaders of the organization. They're the stakeholders. They need to be deciding amongst themselves.
There's a quote that I've seen going around a couple of times, and I'm sure it's an older quote, but I really like it. It's something like, if we have data to make a decision, then let's use that. If all we have are opinions, then let's use mine. Yeah,
exactly. But it's that, and the other thing I think with product ownership 2.0 or 1.0 is they sort of, I think product owners engage organizational dysfunction or function. So, which is what we're talking about. What we're saying is we use the term stakeholders. Let's call them leaders. Okay. Let's call them organizational leaders. Very often these are C-level in a startup sort of organization. Right. These are C-level people who have different views of what the market wants and what customers want. Very often they're founders. Yeah. Right. And it could be a mature organization. It could be quite large, but again, it's this entrepreneurial startup that's accelerating. How do you interface with those folks? Yeah. And very often it is you don't want to become an arbiter. You want them to lead. And Agile requires, and you know this, it requires leaders to make decisions. Yes. It requires leaders to make hard calls. Yeah. It requires leaders to choose like the red pill. I keep using this in my product under, the Matrix, the red pill, blue pill. Yeah. You can't have both pills. Yeah. So like stop it. You have to pick a pill. Yeah. And I think traditional leaders are really uncomfortable because in waterfall, what do? With all due respect, I think you stomp your feet and you say, I want it all. Yeah. And very often you get a lot, but you also get quality compromises and things like that. I think the other thing that is resisting from some of those leaders, from some of those stakeholders, is the fact that they think, because of their past experience, that once I make a decision, that's it. I'm done. I can't change my mind. Right. And one of the things that I try to work with customers on is, look, let's try it this way. Let's decide this thing, or let's head in this direction. And if it's wrong, we'll change it. Or if it's right, we'll keep going and do more of it. But that's inherent. That's part of you and I were talking about. I'm doing some lately. The blessing for me is I'm doing a lot of leadership training in different organizations. So I'm getting a chance to talk to leaders and to try to move their mindset from this waterfall mentality of I decide and then I come back for a prize in 6 months or something. Yeah. And very often I'm disappointed and the organization's disappointed. Yeah. You're constantly, Agile's going to drive you to be constantly making micro adjustments based on the facts on the ground that you're seeing. Yeah. So you have to be ready for that. It's not just a one decision, go play golf. It's a lot of decisions. It's daily decisions. Yeah. You're making these micro trade-offs rather than these macro trade-offs at the very end. Mm-hmm. It's easy to say that to them. And I've had leadership roles. Yeah. It's much harder to when that faces you daily. Yeah. When it's 3 times a day when someone comes into your office and it's not just how are you doing, Bob, or buy some hardware, but this is make a crucial business, a trade-off decision. Yeah. That's actually pretty daunting. Now that's their job. Oh, absolutely. That's their job. That's what you're there for. That's what they're there for. Yeah. So they can't shy away from it. Yeah. But it is daunting. I get the fact that can be scary. Yeah. The other thing you mentioned was quality. So what kind of focus on quality do you think product owners are not focused on enough? I keep saying featureitis. So there are these like what I would call basic product ownership things that are still happening. And so I don't think we've advanced to 2.0, and that's not a ding on anyone. That's more of a maturation in the Agile. So another factor that I still see, and I think it's growing, is featureitis. And a local guy, Todd Olson, I don't know if you've heard Todd, he talks about that. I coined the term earlier than Todd, though. Not that matters, but it does. But where you have a backlog that all it is features. So there is no refactoring, there is no technical debt, there are no bug fixes. Yeah. There is no investment. There's no experimentation. Let's actually throw that in there. Yeah. The notion of running a freaking experiment.
Learning something.
And learning, oh God help it if we learn something. Right. So, but creating the space for that learning, right? Creating the space for that experimentation, like giving you the space to run like an A/B test or something like that, and not dinging you for.
That's the cultural thing that I think is a big part of the transition is it's okay to do that. Right. And if you can't say it's okay to do that, then you're not ready for the other steps that are part of that. So
that's what I mean is I think quality when I talk about it, it's creating the space for a multifaceted backlog, where you can focus on, you're not forcing features down the team's throat, but you're allowing the team time, even for like innovation days or hackathons and things like that, a little bit of space. I'm not talking about a lot of space.
So you're talking about the whole product quality and how to make sure your product is going to be sustainable, deliverable, with the pace that you want to have as you keep going, not necessarily just have good product where you're going.
I think you could corrupt quality if you wanted to as a product owner by just shoving things by the way you interacted with your team. Yeah. So forget whether you have a definition of done. I mean, there are aspects. Do we have automation? Right. Do we have practices? Do we have risk-based testing templates? I mean, you and I both know more Mary Thorne. So there's quality activities, but forget the activities for just a second. Let's assume they're in place. Let's assume you have a holistic quality platform or intentions in place. I think a product owner run amok could put so much pressure, not even run mini amok, could put so much pressure on the team that all of that stuff starts getting jettisoned.
Yeah. When the product owner says, "Oh, don't worry about the automation testing. We'll get it later."
And I know I know it's out there, and I know it's a definition of done. And it's not even, people have this impression of, oh, the dictator product owner can put so much pressure. I've seen damage by the friend product owner. So it's not just the bad product owner. It's the friendly product owner. It's the product owner that the team loves can do as much damage, not intentionally, but they have so much influence over the team. So if they sigh, if your team loves you, and if you if you, in a backlog refinement session, if they say 10 points and your shoulders hunch over and you get really sad, and then the next estimate is
does that work?
I've seen body language from product owners influence estimation. Yeah. I'm just saying, quality, I think product owners create that space. One aspect of it is creating the space. Maybe also partnering with QA, partnering with them from an acceptance criteria perspective, all of that, but just creating the space, a healthy backlog.
Yeah. I think understanding what do we need to do to build this feature to get it, make sure it's correct as a part of functionality. And then how can we get it out the door? I think is where I look at all those things and say.
It may have been, I've done work at a couple clients. I've been at iPreo lately. I've been at Forrester. That's where that class was in Boston. It may have come up at Forrester. One of the students recently, they talked about the product owner being the general manager. So they said, we're the general manager of our team and our backlog. And I sort of like that analogy from a business. So we're the GM. So we have to look at everything. We have to look at short term and long term. We have to look at ROI. We have to look at team health. Yeah. And they started rambling. Oh, everything was a question. We have to, we have to do this and we have to do this. And the broader it was, the happier I became.
Yeah. I went down a rabbit hole, a couple months ago reading sports books, coaches books, John Wooden, Roy Williams, a bunch of, coaching just to see, are we more like the team coach, or to your point, are we more like the general manager? I haven't read any general manager books. Maybe I need to go get one because that would be interesting. I know Jerry West, I think, was one who's got that type of thing. So, but I like trying to do a sports analogy there, even though it's flawed in some regards.
But there's GMs. They're not, see, it's a pretty cool role because if you look at the coach, they're not out in front, like coach in most sports teams, the Cubs. The guy moved, I forget his name, but he moved from the Red Sox to the Cubs. And he was celebrating. So the coach, Joe Madden, I guess, is the new coach of the Cubs. And the Cubs have done, although they're hitting a stumbling point, but they've done well than they've ever have before or in many years. And, I forget the young man, but there's a guy that the general manager, he was in the clubhouse, he was celebrating. And the players were talking in the interviews, were talking about the coach, but they were talking more, Theo Epstein.
Yeah.
And they were talking more about Theo's vision and how he was building the team and how he was short. They weren't saying it. Now I'm embellishing, but short. It's his strategy. It's his vision. It's his staging. It's his time. And he's had to be dogged. It wasn't overnight.
No.
When he was initially, like, he's been in the GM role for like 4 years. Yeah. So he was in the draft. He was drafting people. Yeah. So it's like, sort of like a user story, like, it's like an investigation and experiment. Some of them should, turn out, some of them don't. You can't just be in it for the short term. Sometimes it requires patience to actually see the vision unfold.
I loved, along that same analogy, I love the movie Moneyball and the book Moneyball that talks about Billy Beane and the A's and how they built that team to get on base. And that's all they cared about was let's get guys on base. Let's get hits.
But he's the GM.
Yeah, he's the GM, right?
He's the GM.
He came up with a strategy.
He came up with a strategy. It's behind the scenes. He's not playing. He wasn't a player coach. He's not a coach. Now he has interactions with the coaches. Yeah. So to me, there's this partnership. I actually look at the product owner as not being a coach. I look at them as, this, from the quadrants, they're a leader and they have this partnership with the scrum master. That's another thing I was talking about in the 2.0 class was, but again, I don't think it's an advanced practice. It's emphasizing the partnership there is between the product owner and the scrum master and activating that partnership meeting, talking about strategy. Yeah. Like if you have a team that's struggling, it's not just, it's the product owner and the scrum master can do some offline over coffee. Leave the office once a week. Yeah. Go have some coffee and talk about your team, talk about your product, talk about the shared vision, talk about impediments. Yeah.
And I've been spoiled over the last year and a half when I've been working with Maureen and she's been.
So you have a good,
I have somebody who's going to call me on things, who's going to help me figure things out, who's going to tell me, you need to do this or you don't need to do that. And okay, let's.
But you have a top-notch, and I'm not just saying that, but if you have a top-notch scrum master. Yeah. That's very rare. Yes. Out there. And a lot of folks don't have that. Yeah. And in some cases, I mean, literally, Corey, people are still doing a product owner has 20 team backlog thing. Or why do we need scrum masters at all? Yeah. Or why don't can we have a team lead who's a scrum master, a product owner, a bottle washer, an architect, and a team lead? Right. Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
No, it's.
Did that give you a flavor? It's
did,
weird. Yeah. And I don't mean it to sound sad. It actually doesn't surprise me. I have to reframe it. To me, and I don't know if 2.0, I think that was I don't think there is a 2.0. Okay. I don't think there's a 2.0 in Scrum Master. I don't think there's a 2.0 in product ownership. I think it's called, let's just keep sort of sharpening the saw. Yeah. And and what are the areas? What are the basics? Keep focusing on the basics. Now I need to sell these workshops, so I need to come up with a sexy title. Okay. That sort of does both of
We'll
those.
Figure something out.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think that the ideas of keeping those 1.0 skills, the basic skills, the four that you mentioned in your 4 quadrants, the product management, leadership, and business analyst. I still think we, to your point, we have to keep refining.
We have to keep sharpening them. And coming back, since you like sports analogies. Yeah. I mean, basketball, what do? They dribble. Last year, I forget his name, the young guy who won they won the championship, but he dribbles before practice with 2 balls for like 30 minutes. Yeah. That's his regimen before. And he knows how to dribble, and he knows how to dribble. Michael Jordan, foul shots, would still, the best foul shooters still take 1,000 foul shots in a practice session. Batting practice. So what is the 2.0 activities for a baseball player? There are none.
Yeah. Just get better at those things.
It's called the basics and get better
Yeah.
and refinement. And I think that applies. I'm starting to discover, I think that applies to product ownership.
That 10,000 hours of perfect practice to become an expert at something.
It's
right?
like story writing, and you still see this stuff. And I do think there's some nuance where, like I add value when sometimes I facilitate backlog refinement. And I'll come in, it's not just teaching a product owner class, but I'll actually come into an organization as a coach, and I'll be the scrum master of a 1 hour backlog, grooming or backlog refinement session. And I'll bring my style to play. And I think another 2.0 activity is showing people. So not just, so it's basics, but then getting in the game with someone. Or I'll look at other folk. We'll groom stories. I've been grooming a lot of stories in grooming sessions. I've never seen them before. And then they pop up on the screen, and then folks are like looking at me as a wizard and saying, now what, is this good or bad? What do we do with it?
Yeah.
And we just groom it as a team. So I think that sort of experience learning, that experiential showing people, that's not a 2.0 activity, but I think I'm getting a lot of traction out of that I don't think folks are getting it from just the books.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think so. Just showing people, what an expert would do or someone who's seasoned would do. Like you getting out there and just doing what you do on a daily basis would really would really help sort of what I would call more new teams or more moderate teams.
Yeah. Okay. So what of those skills, those 4 core skills do you think, as you've been coaching or doing working with teams, do you think is the one that the product owners need to work on the most?
Oh, I think I don't, it's a good question. So I think a lot of them, the BA quadrant, I think a lot of product owners have story writing skills. In fact, almost I see some that overwrite. That they take over ownership of the stories. I've rambled about that in blog posts before, that you have this, that, they bring them to the team and the team rejects them, then they go back and they refine them. Yeah. It's like, stop that. So I think the BA quadrant or the story writing or the requirements quadrant, most product owners get that. The project management is a challenge from the point of view, goes back to release planning. Release planning. Looking at the backlog as something more than a list of requirements. Looking at it as more than just a prioritized list. You know how I feel. It's a richer list to me. Yeah. It's a richer thing to me than just being a prioritized list of stuff of requirements, of stakeholder needs. Right. It's much more nuance. It is that. Yeah. But there's much more nuance. I think that's a weakness. Leadership is probably the biggest gap from my point of view. Okay. And it's this courage. So scrum masters need courage, and product owners, I think, need courage to say, you've seen that. I've showed that Nieberg video. The Heinrich,
no is the most important word.
No is the most important word.
Absolutely.
And it is the most important word.
It lets you focus. I mean,
it
that's
lets
the
you
thing.
Focus in a world. And do you know how hard it is for people? Do you know how much argument I get from people? Just even the word, not saying the word, but even the notion of considering no as a word that I might use with a gun to my head.
Yeah. Kim and I did a whole show just on why product owners can say no and how you can say no. Because very rarely do you want to just go, no, we're not doing that. Right. That means you're a jerk or you're doing something else. But there are ways to say no nicely. There are ways to say no to where it's seen as a good thing. Yep. It's a muscle you got to exercise.
So it's leadership from a courage perspective. It goes back to that article, the own nothing. I own nothing, the stakeholders. Well, then from my point of view, that's great from a project management quadrant. That's great from a product management quadrant. It's great from a requirement writing. But then I don't need you as, you're not a leader, right?
What are you here for?
Why don't we just get a memo from the stakeholders and shove it under the team's nose and you can go to the beach, right? It's saying no. It's being a strategic leader, being a tactical leader, owning, like that young man in Chicago, owning the strategy, firmly. I know he hit bumps. I know he made mistakes of people that he sort of recruited, etc. But staying the course. Staying the court, that's what you're getting paid for. You're a leader. And rallying the troops around that, providing that sort of staunch, but pivoting when necessary. So not, having the wherewithal to say, I was wrong, or I need to make an adjustment. Right. And explaining the why. So I personally think that leadership stuff, because a lot of POs are inexperienced to begin with. And what do you do when you're inexperienced? You focus on the easier bits.
Yeah, the things you know how to do.
Like writing stories rather than that big picture leadership stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think, one of the things I do a lot is both testing. As a product owner, I want to test a lot. I want to test what's being built. I want to make sure that it works, right? Just for my own, because I have a QA background, that's part of what I do.
I know that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me.
Well, is that something that you think a lot of product owners want to do or resistant to do, is to test their own products? Or at least use them?
So I would separate test from, when you say that, I have a concern.
Okay.
So I don't want, if you're testing to verify, like the team, then I would say you might be doing damage because you're doing, right. I want the team to verify, right?
I do too. Yeah. So
right.
what I mean is when.
So if you're using it.
I'm using it.
So using, yes.
Okay.
That says you care.
So I'm accepting stories.
And you're, of course, accepting.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you're literally testing, let me exaggerate it.
Sure.
You don't trust the testers on the team. There's been some defect escapes. So now by the sheer force of your will, you're covering those.
Yeah, that's not what I'm doing at all. That's not what I mean to do.
Yeah.
What I mean to do is,
because it's that it's not that you can't. You're a hell of a tester, right? You have that in your background and you could do that, but you're not holding the team accountable for that.
Right.
So to me, the usage stuff, I literally think the product owner needs to be like a product champion.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to demo it to clients, to potential clients or to
right.
stakeholders. I don't like the model. I don't know if we've ever talked about this. I don't like the model where the product owner runs through every story in the demo. I personally like the model where the team
does it,
exposes stuff.
Yeah.
And the product owner is part of that team,
sure.
so they can do that. But
everyone
I like the view where in a demo, everyone gets a chance to get on stage.
Yep.
And they have an opportunity to show off their hard work. I like that. But you should be in a position you should probably have the deepest, broadest understanding of the functionality that you're asking for, I would imagine.
Okay. What do you think about design as part of a product owner's responsibility? Design thinking or type of UX type of thing. Not working with designers, of course, working with the team, but what do you think about them having inputs into how the product should work?
I think they can. I worry about sort of dilution. Mm-hmm. So I'll use iContact as an example. Michelle Engel, I don't know if you ever met Michelle, mm-hmm. she built a pretty nice, complementary product owner organization, product management organization at iContact. At one point UX reported to me there as a development leader. And then we divested that and we had maybe 10 people in our UX team, different styles of UX, mm-hmm. Some designers, some researchers, etc. We made that report to, Michelle, and they became adjunct to the product owner organization. So adjunct from the point of view of helping write stories, helping do look ahead. I think they complemented product owners.
Okay.
I don't know. So if you have that background, sure, we could add a fifth quadrant, right? We could add a fifth quadrant and that wouldn't make sense, but we could add a fifth or something. But I would worry about because the role is so darn hard to begin with.
It is. The reason I do some of that work is A, because I'm interested in it. Yeah. B, because it goes to the why. Why are we building this? What types of experiences do we want the user to have when they use our product? And we need to have a good story to get the team to implement that. But maybe there's some thinking ahead of time with the designers about. But
see, that's where I go is it's just, and I would never shut you off if it's your passion and you have some experience. It would be like we would modify it. But let's say we were building an organization with 20 Corey Bryants and so we had 20 POs, or 20 POs.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to have your skill set. Yeah. So I personally have the lineage to UX it's like architecture.
Yeah.
So to me, systems architecture, back-end database architecture, UX architecture, UX design are these things that come in. They're almost another set of streams of backlogs that come into product ownership, and we have to figure out how to interleave them.
Yeah. I've definitely used design of course, with a Kanban type system as an input to the team to say, okay, the story's ready now because we have what we need to do for the team to make progress on it. I just like it, and I think it's something that needs to be a part of
but
every
at the
product
end of the
as
day,
designed. It may not be from me, but it may be from somebody else. I need to understand that.
But you have to buy it. I mean, I'm a firm proponent that the PO, so we can have all these streams coming into the product owner, and the product owner has direct ownership of some of them, like the defect stream versus the feature stream versus the refactoring stream.
Yeah.
That's probably have direct ownership of that. But then there's a UX stream perhaps, or an architectural stream. That product owner owns the sort of the balancing across all of those streams.
Yeah.
So it just depends on your skill set about how much involvement you have.
Okay. In relation to the article where it's a people problem, what do you think are some of the best soft skills a product owner can have?
I don't know.
Should they have any soft skills?
No, of course. I mean, it's not just the product owner. I think, this is true of agile teams in general. I mean, I think emotional, there's some books that come to mind, like Crucial Conversations is a great book.
Fantastic book.
That talks about having those hard, so it's not just soft, so there's soft skills that are too soft.
Yeah.
Right, that I don't really, I'm trying to make friends with everyone. Yeah. So Crucial Conversations, emotional intelligence comes to mind. The 5 dysfunctions of a team comes to mind. How to build trust and how to lead teams. So I think being a student of some of those things, sports, in all seriousness, I like studying leadership from the point of view of sports leaders.
Absolutely.
Now that sometimes doesn't resonate really well in the agile community. Because they can appear, like Mike Krzyzewski can appear too prescriptive when he's spitting at someone on the sidelines. And yelling at them first.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. As a Carolina fan, yes, that's true.
Right. Or whatever. So they don't always align with agile principles, but they do for me.
Yeah.
I think, from a product owner, being a team member, the key thing for me, and I'm working on, is listening.
Yeah, I think listening is one I need to work on myself.
I've had to, this should come as no shock to you, Corey. It's been on my to-do list for 15 years. This is not all joking aside. As a leader, I try to remind myself to be a good listener.
Yeah.
Not just in team settings, but in one-on-one settings.
Yeah.
And with listening comes the art, that wonderful art of asking, Lisa Atkins talks about this, asking these wonderful open-ended coaching questions. Mm-hmm. So I think this would be a good soft skill for a product owner, is how that wonderful art of asking the right open-ended question and then shutting your mouth and then listening.
Yeah, listening, gathering information, and then going,
following up.
Let me ask this question.
Yeah, and that follow-up, that dialogue. That to me would go a long way in listening to your team. Listen, and it's everywhere. So let's bring it back to home to the product owner role. Sprint planning. Do you really listen when your team is tasking things out? Yeah. And you should. Do you listen to I'm not talking to you, but should people listen to their body language? If someone breaks into tears, with tasking, listen.
Maybe that's a signal.
Maybe that's a signal.
They're signaling.
So in the daily stand-up, in the ceremonies, actually really, really deeply pay attention. Yeah. That's why I don't like product owners taking notes in grooming sessions. I want the product owner to sort of guiding the discussion, guiding the Q&A, but I don't want them to be the note keeper. I actually want them to almost be a mini facilitator. Yeah. Right. I want the scrum master to be the facilitator, maybe having a team member take notes so that they're paying attention. Mm-hmm. But I want you to be in the moment, or the product owner to be in the moment of really getting that deep listening going.
One of the things that I've been doing the last 2 years, and because of Maureen, is she has moved me to the back of the team on the stand-ups. And I'm there to listen. And if I have a question, I can raise my hand at the end. She lets me do that. But for the most part, and it's true, I'm there to listen. I'm there to see if there's anything that I can help with, or if anybody needs me. If not, great, I'll go do my thing.
But there's so much you can learn about the nature of the work. What's hard, what's easy. What has back end, what has testing. We can talk about what has testing. If I give them a story like this, the testing implications are hard or easy. The development implications, the UX implications are this or that. It's like pay attention to the workflow of how the team is going to react to it.
You did write an article this week. Was it this week? Are you talking about peanut butter and jelly?
I was talking about peanut butter and jelly. Yes.
So, and it was mainly about certifications and Scrum Masters. And I know you guys have talked about it on the Metacast and a few things else, but you're talking about here, what else can you do to get certifications, or what can you do with certifications, or what should you do with certifications?
So I struggle with this stuff sometimes because I'm in the Scrum community and I rub elbows with certified Scrum trainers in the Scrum Alliance, and I'm a certified Scrum coach. So sometimes I want to rail against the machine, but I don't want to aggravate the machine so much that the machine kicks me out as well. So in that article, I'm really finding, and I'm not picking on one certified Scrum trainer. I'm actually picking on, and not just the Scrum Alliance. There's this notion of certified Scrum Master, and Scrum.org has a certification. Mm-hmm. There's 3 or 4 certifying bodies. What I'm finding is I'm out there in the world coaching, and I'm running into random Scrum Masters in organizations. And to put it frankly, these organizations just suck at Agile. Mm-hmm. But the Scrum Masters aren't stepping up. They're not telling truth. They're not, for example, saying we need more Scrum Masters, or there should be one product owner per backlog per team. Yeah. The organizations, so you have these people, and in some cases the organizations don't have them, so I'm not picking on them. Yeah. But they're not taking the role, or they're not operating as they're not Maureen. Mm-hmm. So you were talking about Maureen. Yeah. I mean, I look at Maureen as she's going to keep the organization. She may not win every argument, but she's going to raise impediments to the mm-hmm. organization. She's going to have the courage to move you to the back of the stand-up.
And she does that not because she's certified, but because she's got the experience.
She has experience. She has chops. What we do then is we set these people up with a 2-day cert, then we throw them back in the organization. Yeah. And it's like, and we get them all jazzed up. Very often what happens is these folks are really excited because they had a great 2-day class. Yeah. Then you throw them back, and then they're out there in the real world. And I don't think we're doing enough.
Yeah. So I like the idea of having that as kind of a learner's permit.
So that's what I said. And I said, Scrum Master, and we're not emphasizing any and. We're just, and I think, to be honest, I think we're going at it for the money. And we're throwing these people out, and we're creating, so the machine is create as many as possible. And I want to do that, but I also want them to have a survival rate. I want them to have an empowered rate. Yeah. And I don't think you do that with the CSM. I think you do that with mentoring and coaching, ongoing coaching. Yeah. I brought up that I like the analogy of a learner's permit. A couple CSTs that I know don't like that. They've already let me know that they don't like that analogy. But I do like it that you're just practicing. The other thing is, it's not just against, we should be communicating to those folks and to their businesses that when you send someone to a CSM, this is what you get back. You don't get a fully empowered certified Scrum Master. Yeah. You get someone who's just starting their journey. So you don't throw them into a team. Yeah. Like you wouldn't, if I was running a company, I wouldn't throw someone with a learner's permit, hopefully into a semi truck and say, here, go deliver tires to Alabama. Right.
Well, yeah. And the reason I like the article is because I thought it was applicable to both product owners and Scrum Master certifications.
I think it's true.
It's the same problem.
It's the same problem. If you have this view where the certification has it has weight, but I don't think in the real world. I've always valued real world chops over the certs. Yeah. Call it experience. And I think it's that combination.
I really like the Scrum, the Scrum coach certification process because it's not a test. It's not a class. It's an application.
It's an application.
Here's what I've done and here's how effective that was.
And they interview, and it's hard actually. It's a really hard cert from the point of view of people, small teams form, and they want you. The goal is to get you to be a CSC, but they really want to interrogate you. They want to deeply understand and listen to what is your experience relative to the bar that it has. And it goes back to this. Have you coached? You can't just read a book. You have to have coached in multiple instances in the real world and been relatively successful.
Okay. Well, good. I want to do something with each of our interviewees.
Okay.
And it's not a game per se. But it is a little fun thing.
Okay. So, if you test me, I'll hurt you later on, but we'll see how it goes.
It's not really a test.
Oh no.
It's just 3 questions.
Oh my goodness.
3 questions with Bob Galen. Oh, cool. You ready for the first one?
I hope so.
Name 3 of your favorite apps or programs that you use in your personal life and why you like them.
programs that I use in my
just apps on your phone, or not something you use for work unless you really like it.
Oh my gosh, Corey. I don't use apps that much.
You don't?
No. I mean, what do I use? Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think. I'm not a big, I use the airline, so I'll cop out this way.
Okay.
Delta, Southwest.
You like the Delta apps? Okay.
And American Airlines. And Delta's my favorite app.
Okay. Why is that?
It's the most, so they've anticipated, they're very nimble, they experiment a lot. It's, for example, they have a bag tracking feature where you can track your bags, and it's accurate. So they lost.
Really?
No.
What a concept!
They lost my bag recently.
Yeah.
They lost it, and it actually tracked it in transit to my hotel.
Wow,
that's pretty darn cool.
That's nice
from my perspective, which is some random.
As somebody who travels a lot,
I travel a lot, so I know bags. I copped out with the question.
No, it's perfect. That's perfect. And that's the reason why.
But the Delta app rocks. If you travel, and I have all of the airlines on.
Yeah.
And the other ones are just sort of interfaces to the system. But Delta is weird. And I think they say it's award winning, but I can see why.
Yeah. Okay.
From a function and feature.
Very good.
Oh, now your second question.
Second question. What's the second most amazing thing you've seen a product owner do? Not the first, but the second.
I think so the first one would be to say no at appropriate times.
Yeah. And
to say it in the right way.
Sure.
Right. So it's really about no. It really isn't. It goes back to, I need to listen to your podcast about saying no. So I don't think no is the right word sometimes, right? But it's how do you guide that?
The right intent.
To me, it's emotional. This emotional intent of ownership, of showing that you care about your team. That you lead your team. So I'll give you an instance. I had one time, I remember a product owner, a team signed up for 10 stories, let's say, and they delivered 6. So on the surface, they
failed.
They failed.
Yeah.
But they delivered the right 6.
Yeah.
And they delivered this hard 6. And it was incredibly hard. And they were getting dinged in a review. And, meaning, you failed.
Yeah.
Because a lot of stakeholders, they don't look at effort. They don't look at
outcomes.
They don't look at technical complexity. They don't look at level of difficulty. It's just freaking you promise me 10, give me 10.
Yeah, I want 10.
And I want 12. and they defended them, but they defended it not defensively, but they were also emotional, and they were a team member.
Okay.
So an emotional team member, a member of the team.
Okay. And the last question for Bob Galen. What product ideas are you most excited about for the future?
Me personally?
Yeah, you personally.
So one that's been rambling, and it's so retrospectives are something that I really think are powerful, and I don't know if there's a good tool for retrospectives.
Okay.
I use Trello boards for them for distributed teams. There's a guy in DC, I forget his. There's a few distributed tools that are out there. So when I say doing distributed retrospectives, not doing them in a canned way. So not having, there are tools out there now where you can, like, they have 100 techniques, and it's like a menu system where you plan I think that's a little artificial for it. I don't know if you need to spice it up that
more
much.
More open is fine.
It gets a little silly, but retrospectives, figuring out how to hold teams accountable to action, to continuous improvement in a soft way, in a collaborative way. I still think that's an open space. I would love to be the product owner for a little team doing a tool on retrospectives. Fantastic. I think I have a backlog, and I have a backlog for this at home.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, let's hook you up with a team.
I know.
You know a lot of teams.
I haven't done it I haven't looked at it in a while, but I know I have a fledgling epic level backlog, because I think it's such a rich, retrospectives are so cool. The other thing is what I find with Velocity, I'm a member of Velocity Partners. I've listened in as a coach on our clients with our teams, and they're very quiet when they're on the phone or something. It's hard to engage. So it's not just the tool, but how do we get a tool that actually levels the playing field in distributed team members to local team members to get really high impact retros?
Very nice.
Did the passion come through there?
I like it.
I'm excited. I get excited about that. Now
Good.
I've renewed my fire about
Good.
that.
Go forth and conquer. So we have, feedback. If anybody listening wants to give us feedback, they can contact us about questions, about product ownership, or let us know about anything you're curious about. We're on Twitter at DeliveritCast and email at deliveritcast@gmail.com. We got a wonderful email from Sandra in the Netherlands, talking about how she loves the show, and she gave us some suggestions, which was great, and how it's a great fit for her commute, which is why I love podcasts, because you can listen to them while you're doing nothing else. And she really likes it. And one of the things I really like, and one of the reasons I'm doing this show is because there are very few times when product owners can get confirmation or talk to other product owners. And I think that's one of the things I really like doing about this. She was having fun with that too. We're also still accepting auditions for our new co-hosts. So, as we mentioned, Kim's going to be gone after episode 20. And if you're interested, please send your auditions in. We have a question from a listener, Bob, for you.
Oh no.
Jeremy asks, hey Bob, I'd like to hear what the current thinking is on the best way to do backlog grooming.
I think it's the way, I hate to point to the book, but I think in the book is the same way. It's, invest in it, have it be team-based, have it be iterative and evolutionary. So I still subscribe to this, only look at stories. I joke about egg timers and things like that. So only have a velocity for grooming where you don't beat stories to death and you don't try to, you let cook time happen between different grooming sessions. So I think all of my standard advice, just try to follow that. Don't just groom in meetings too. Another thing I've been amplifying lately is groom offline. So I like to talk about what the 10% time or 5, it's, somewhere around 5 to 10% or whatever it is. So have some meeting time, but also allow folks to sort of noodle on the backlog and on their discussions and on design and UX offline on the water coolers and then bring that back. So I think it's an effective oscillation. The team should be looking at the backlog. Every team member should be looking at the backlog every day. Yeah. I would call that a grooming activity from my point of view. Yeah. So, you can get a copy of the book, a free PDF by signing up for my, on my email list, and you can look at grooming in there and then ask me specific questions. But I think those basics still apply, and make it team-based. And don't mail it in. I still encounter, we talked about, old practice. It's still the fact, I still see this way too often where a project manager and a architect do all of the grooming. Yeah. And then they present a set of stories to a team in sprint planning.
Here's what you're doing.
Isn't it? Have you seen that?
Oh yeah.
But I mean, in this day and age.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Now, and I, to add to that, I really like the ideas that I've gotten from you and from others, which is, the team should be seeing a story 3 times before they pull it in the sprint planning, right? Those other times, or the grooming sessions, you bring it in, or the story discovery sessions, as we've learned to call them sometimes.
I like that.
Yeah. And, the other thing is, try to get through a couple stories in each session, right? Don't have one story per session. I typically like to go between 4 and 6 stories, because they should be sized, or maybe there's just an introduction and maybe you don't estimate. You just introduce the story and you get questions about it and you go back and you write.
Don't have that view of trying to finish it in a session. If it's, so readiness rocks. This notion of a ready story and having readiness criteria and moving it down this line towards getting it ready rocks. So just have the notion in grooming or refinement where you're just taking steps towards readiness. Now, if it's a relatively straightforward story and it jumps there in 5 minutes, so be it. Yeah. But not all stories are so straightforward.
Right. Okay. So there you go, Jeremy. Hope that helps.
Yeah.
Bob Galen. Thank you very much.
Oh no, this was a pleasure. You guys rock. Thank you for, you hit it. Product ownership is an incredibly powerful thing. It still needs a lot of nurturing and care and feeding. And guys like you and Kim just giving back to the community, I think it's a wonderful thing. So thank you for your service. And it was my pleasure.
Very good. If you want to find more Bob, he is online at www.rgalen.com, on Twitter.
Bob Galen.
At Bob Galen.
Yes.
And we will have a link to his Scrum Product Ownership book, which is, I think, the second thing that most people who are interested in product ownership, when they ask me a question, I point them to the 15-minute video from Heinrich. Yeah. And then I say, go get Bob's book.
Oh, you are
It's the first
You're
and
great.
Second edition.
You're great.
Is there a third edition?
I'm working on it, actually, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, but no promises as to when. But there has been work done on it.
Excellent.
There is a backlog for it, and there's been some minor execution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, with that, I think we're going to say our disclaimer, which is these words are our own, especially Bob's, and not endorsed or representative of any company or organization. But if you'd like to, hit me up. You can find me online at iscoreybryan on Twitter, or I infrequently blog at don'tyellatme.wordpress.com. Kim can be reached through the show contact info, and we just delivered episode 18. Thank you very much for joining us.
Take care, everyone.
Next time.
Thank you, Corey.